Welcome to Go-to-Market Science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. Now let's get into it. All right, today we are going to talk about how AI is changing Outbound. Today, my guest is John Barrows, CEO and founder of JB Sales. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eddie. It's good to see you.
Likewise. I always feel so nervous on the intro. It's like, you got to get it all out, and then it's all easier after that.
I do my intros after the fact. I never do them before the fact, because just in case I do fuck them up.
I'm too lazy for that, but I respect it. And, you know, it's like particularly nerve-wracking with you because I want to give an intro, and I have known you or known of you for like 15 years. You and your team have trained sales reps at Salesforce, where I worked, LinkedIn, Google, many other companies. It was your training that I took when I first learned about the basics of Outbound at Salesforce, which is ironic because I'd already been in sales for like 10 years and had never taken any course that taught me any like actual best practices on the thing. And so, you know, this is the second time I think you've come onto the podcast, and I'm just excited to dive into it with you again today.
Yeah, man, it's been a long, interesting road, right? And AI is definitely making things more interesting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I feel this way. I'm sure you do too. I think a lot of CROs and revenue leaders feel this way. It's like, it's exciting what's possible. It's also stressful and nerve-wracking, feeling this massive FOMO, feeling like you're constantly behind. It seems like everybody else is doing all these amazing things. Every single LinkedIn post is about this new, like, you know, thing that somebody built over the weekend in Claude and fired their entire sales team. And you're just like, okay, like, how do we separate, you know, the noise from the signal here?
Yeah, it's getting tough. I've actually, I mean, I still post on LinkedIn all the time, but I these days I've kind of removed myself from engaging on LinkedIn, or like, you know, consuming on LinkedIn, because to your point, it's nothing but FOMO or fear or even just comparison, in the sense that, you know, you see everybody's always telling, oh, you know, crushing it, and I got this, and I just was able to do that, and I, you know, IPO here and 100 million there. And it's like, you know, like we were talking about before we got on here, right? It's, you know, if you live in the US and you're doing okay, you're doing better than the vast majority of most people, no matter what you hear about these billionaires and trillionaires and all that other stuff. It's kind of the same thing on LinkedIn. You know, most people are not doing as well as they look like they're doing on LinkedIn. But it's, you know, human comparison. What is that? Comparison's the thief of joy, or whatever that saying is. And I try to remind myself of that and just stay in my lane and not try to compare myself to too many other people. So
I feel the same way. I try really hard to think about the long term over the short term. And I feel like every time in my business that I'm just scrambling to try to like figure something out really quickly, it tends not to have the best results. Whereas if you really take a step back and think about the long term and think like, and this is what we're going to get into in the podcast, like, how do you build the fundamentals? How do you make the thing actually work? And usually that requires, for me, multiple iterations. And sometimes you have to like go down the rabbit hole and like peel the onion back and dig deeper. And I don't mean to be too metaphorical here, but I mean like literally where you discover, oh, the reason this thing isn't working is because the layer beneath that is not working, and I got to go fix that. And then you find another layer below that. And I think it requires this level of dedication that these posts on LinkedIn of like, oh, I just built this thing in Claude over the weekend and revolutionized my go-to-market or replaced my sales team. You're like, really? Like, can you report back when you have real results to report?
So that's where I think we're at right now, is that we are absolutely still in the efficiency phase of AI, not the results phase of AI. Like I challenge anybody to tell me that they've tripled their results, quadrupled their results because of AI. Time back, sure. Efficiency, more like better at making the, you know, connecting the dots and everything else, absolutely. But triple, you know, whatever your results, come on. And I ask anybody, including myself, that whenever you see somebody who's saying, oh, I just did this thing, and comment Claude and I'll drop you just take 2 seconds to see what are they selling. Because if they're appointment setters and they're giving you a prompt about, like, the whole flow is like, when people are selling what they sell to drive revenue, that is what you need, but it's what they do, it's a different story. So like for me, it's always like when I talk to other sales trainers and, you know, consultants who talk about oh yeah, build your brand and build your brand, and you just got to do it. And I'm like, could you back off a little bit? Yes, brand is important. There's no question about it. But as a sales trainer or sales consultant who sells sales training and consulting to sales reps, it's a hell of a lot easier to build your brand. Like I'm a crackhead who sells crack to crackheads. It's pretty easy for me to sell the dream to a crackhead, right? But go tell that 22-year-old kid who's selling to, selling cybersecurity to CISOs to build your brand and see how long they last at it. Like, again, it's important. It's just not as easy as 99% of people let you know it, like make you think it is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And on the flip side, and I'm sure that you've seen a lot of this and we'll get into it, like we've had a lot of people on the podcast that are CROs in really established companies, like serious amounts of revenue, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million in revenue, that have revolutionized their go-to-market with AI and have real results to report. But none of them said that they built it over a weekend.
Never, ever, 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 ever. It's a systemic. The only ones that I've ever seen do that are like RevOps, marketing, sales, alignment, you know what I mean? All in this, like build it together, not just some sexy prompt that somebody did or some new AI thing that somebody implemented. It takes a village, if you will, to make sure that this stuff works the right way. And those results, I mean, I think what was the report about a year ago that, MIT came out with it, like 95% of corporate AI initiatives have failed. And because I think AI is really still good for, individuals. It's fantastic for individuals, right? Because you can get creative, you can do it. But once you start to standardize on AI, it starts to unravel real fast, especially if you don't have buy-in from the group and almost that ground up approach, right? I think top down thinking in today's world of AI is a fool's way of thinking about it, because the days of like an executive, a singular, 2 or 3, figuring out, okay, A, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? B, what are the solutions out there? C, let's go evaluate those solutions, pick one, implement it. I mean, you're 9 to 12 months out of any real implementation of any like technology at this point, AI specifically. And can you tell me what this world's going to look like in 9 to 12 months? Like, I can't tell what it's going to look like 9 to 12 days from now. So that top down, like we're going to do it this way, and then you're going to do it the way that we want you to, I just don't think is viable at this point. I think it has to be a ground up, like all hands on deck. Let's all work together here. Let's figure out where we can make iterative improvements, and then just keep tweaking and adjusting and going, because what worked 6 months ago is just not working anymore right now.
It's such an interesting perspective. One of the people we had on our podcast was Kyle Norton, and he wrote an article on this specific debate, right? When the way he framed the debate is, basically, should we have a bunch of salespeople vibe coding solutions for themselves versus having like a centralized approach where you have RevOps, developers, et cetera? And he makes the strong argument for the latter. Now, I think like even his argument, and I don't want to screw up in trying to paraphrase an article that I haven't read for a month or two. I think that there's tremendous value in this sort of like ground up approach where like an individual sales rep, especially somebody with a little bit of experience that, has the context of conversations with customers, that's seeing things on the front lines every day. If they sit down to try to like figure out their own solution, they're probably going to get pretty far. And for some reason, my head is going straight to triggers, which is probably something that I first started thinking a lot about via your training. And I remember talking to reps and they're like, I'm using this tool, I'm using that tool, even at Salesforce, like to find all of these triggers. And it's like, that makes sense to me. But on another level, for that rep to try to compete with a really, really talented RevOps team where you've got strategic folks, you've got, developers, you've got the CRO behind them, you've got budget, you've got resources, and they're spending all day, every day trying to build these enterprise solutions for their own team. Maybe like I'm just looking at this through a different lens from you and we're saying the same thing here. But I'm a big fan of, it's hard for me to believe that like 5 years from now, we're going to just have a bunch of vibe coded solutions built by salespeople for themselves.
And I actually don't think that's the right approach at all. I think there's a hybrid approach between the two, and it's not individual reps doing their own thing. It's just, well, let's go back to the one that everybody, is familiar with, the cadence. It's the same thing with the cadence discussion, right? With the sales velocity outreaches and all that stuff. There's two usually main approaches that most companies take. One is marketing locks down the messaging, creates it all, creates the sequences, and then gives it to the sales reps with no autonomy at all. And the sales reps just got to push buttons, right? That's what you get with that scenario is the sales reps just push buttons. They don't care. They don't try. They don't really engage at all. They're just, okay, I'm supposed to hit this. Now, on the flip side, you give sales off or whatever it is to the reps and say, go ahead, do whatever you want to do, create whatever cadence. It becomes this rat's nest. There's that neither one of those is the right approach. It's the hybrid approach. And when I talk about, the ground up, how I work with a lot of my clients or recommend my clients work is you almost turn your sales org into a sales lab. And because for a couple of reasons. One is if people don't feel involved right now and engaged, they're going to get scared. We're all looking over our shoulders saying, when is AI going to come for us? Right? All of us. And so if you don't learn out loud together, you're letting these reps do what they're going to do anyways. They're going to go play with this stuff anyways. It's easy enough to do for anybody. And they're always going to be looking over their shoulder. And so if you can align the two, talk about how engineers have hackathons, right? Well, I think we should do the same thing with sales orgs. I think we should turn our sales org into a sales hackathon, right? Where once a week, once a month, whatever, get the whole GTM org together, sales, marketing, even SEs and that type of stuff. Break up into little groups of like 4 or 5 people, right? So it's a mix of SDR, AE, and the young generation that has the AI native, the older generation that has the experience, the marketers, the SEs. And pick any aspect of the GTM approach that isn't working, that is kind of the weak link of the process or whatever, and give a framework and say, all right, everybody, you have about an hour. Whoever can figure out either with existing tools or with AI, a better way of doing this thing, whatever it is, right? Looking for triggers, automating this, prepping for meetings, any of that stuff. Whoever figures out a best solution wins. And then everybody goes at it for about an hour or two, whatever. And then everybody presents their solution. We vote on which one we like. Then we go ahead and implement that. RevOps then takes it from there and starts to tweak it and say, okay, no, and then quick turnaround. Did it work? Right? Great, fantastic. What's the next thing we're trying to get here? So RevOps can do kind of the fundamental stuff on the back end while all this stuff is happening. But if you're not engaging with the organization right now, like I came out of a RevOps. There was a RevFest that was about a month and a half ago with Go Nimbly, right? And Jen, she's fantastic. RevFest is actually one of the cooler events out there. But what happened was, it's obviously all RevOps. And somebody came up on stage and said, hey, how many enablement people are in the room? And a couple of hands went up. And there was a couple of like low-level boos that I heard in the audience, like boo, right? And I was like, huh. Now, Jen took it a different way. She thought, oh, it's not enough for here. And I was like, I don't think that's what it was. Because the speaker then kind of went on to say how enablement was, in the world of AI is questionable on the value of them, right? Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of bad enablement out there, just like there's plenty of bad RevOps out there. But then they went on to profess about all these things that RevOps was doing to, produce all this great information for sales reps to then leverage in the sales process and surfacing things and all this stuff. And I'm like, I think you're missing it. All this wonderful stuff that you're developing and producing for sales reps, the vast majority of sales reps aren't equipped to use that information in a way, in a meaningful way when it comes to engaging with a client. And so if we're still in this RevOps is better than enablement, or marketing is better than sales, and sales is over here and marketing is over here and RevOps is over here, those organizations are failing and will fail, period. It's the ones who do this that are gonna survive, because it's such an iterative process right now. If you are not lean, if you are not agile, if you are not constantly testing and trying things out and involving the entire org, you're gonna fail, period.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for the people just listening to this on audio, you get a little hand signal that I think stood for some level of integration, if I interpret it correctly. And I totally agree. I think the lens that I look through as somebody that's been, working in RevOps since I started this company about 10 years ago, is that I've seen so many, failed initiatives, whether it's like something as basic as just implementing Salesforce, just because there's not somebody to carry the ball forward. So it's like, okay, we've got that MVP in place. And we saw this with our clients when I first started, and we would do these 6-week projects. And then we call them 6 months later after they stop working with us. And it's like, how's it going? And it's like, well, we're still trying to get the reps on Salesforce. Now, granted, like there's a lot of issues there that are starting to be solved with AI, like especially like all the admin work that I'm excited that reps don't have to do as much of. But for me, like the big thing was nobody carrying the ball forward. So I love this idea of a hackathon. I love the idea of getting ideas from the front line, especially as somebody who spent my entire career in sales and I still sell today. I don't want somebody like working off in a silo that's never carried a bag, that doesn't understand what my day-to-day looks like. But at the same time, we've got to like carry this forward, make sure it works. We've got to iterate on it. We've got to get the reports. And then ultimately for me, where the rubber meets the road is there a report that shows that A, we're executing this thing, whatever that thing is, and B, it's producing the desired result? So if we're trying to do outbound and we're like booking a bunch of meetings and none of them convert to pipeline, well, then the job is not done, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's faster cycles, test, iterate, test, into a reasonable amount of time. You don't want to give up too fast on something. And to your point, if there's not a champion internally who's running with it, who's responsible for it, just like training, you know what I mean? Like, so many people look at training as the fix, they invest in the training. Oh, the trainer comes in and it's like, and I love the question when they ask, well, what's the reinforcement of the, what's your reinforcement package? I'm like, where are your managers going to be? Who's going to own this? You know what I mean? Like, are you going to do this on a weekly basis in your forecast reviews? Is the executive going to ask the VP of sales, who's going to ask the director of sales, who's going to ask the managers, where are they on this metric? How are you using this thing? Right. And if that's not there, then it is what it is. Training is what it is. You know what I mean? It gives you that bump and a few reps are going to take it and run with it, but then it'll die on the vine. And so if you don't have a plan these days, it's almost not worth doing. If you haven't thought through, okay, who's going to be like our SWAT team, if you will, like the group of people that we're going to test this with, and what are we going to look at? What are those metrics, and who's going to own it? And what are the milestones that we're going to look at to prove that whether this is working or not? If you don't have that and you're just throwing spaghetti up against the wall, then, you might find something that works, but you're going to have an organization that's all over the place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have a bunch of frameworks that we've created for our website on outbound, inbound, just overall go-to-market. And we've got these 4 levels. One is fundamentals, the next is adoption and optimization, and then amplification, where you have like AI and automation, right? And so we kind of think of the base of the pyramid as the fundamentals and adoption. So the fundamentals are like, what's our basic process, our technology, et cetera. And then adoption, how do we get people to actually do the thing, right? How do we execute? And then for me, within that adoption, it comes down to having a management cadence of reviewing reports and coaching reps. And so I don't mean like that we're painting by numbers here, but if, for example, our goal is to do something that results in more pipeline being generated, if managers are not looking at these reports on a weekly or daily basis to see if we're actually generating more pipeline and then coaching reps on how to improve, like, what's the point of any of this?
And look, I think it gets back to we're in a society of well, look, I think as human beings, we are all wired to be lazy, period. Least path of resistance. I mean, if you go all the way back into history and, the cavemen, that type of thing, like, they might not have eaten for like 3 or 4 days. You know what I mean? So it was all about conserving and how quick, how easy can I do something before I have to put in the effort. So just as humans, we look for, and you can prove this right now just by scrolling through LinkedIn again. Go look at all these fucking posts that say, oh, look at this prompt pack and, just comment Claude and I'll send it to you. And they get 1,000 comments on their posts like Claude. That saddens me every time I see it, because it just means that all those 1,000 people are begging for the easy button. They're begging for the just do this. And they're not willing to put in the work. That's why the people who are willing to put in the work, the companies who are willing to put in the work, the companies who are willing to put the systems in place and stay consistent when they're the ones that win, and the ones that are just looking for the quick fix tend to be the same as the reps who are looking for the quick fix.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get into brass tacks here. And I'm going to start with a question. This is like the longest intro ever, but I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience did. Somebody hit me with a question, and I don't want to name drop. I know you know this person, and a lot of people listening would as well. Let's just say that this person works at a very large like PEVC firm and used to work at a very large tech company in like the go-to-market tech ecosystem and is an expert on the topic that you and I are talking about. And he hit me with this question the other day, and he's like, do you know any companies where outbound is working where they don't have a strong brand? And you kind of can unpack this. So it's like, the first question is like, who's actually succeeding at outbound today? And are any of those companies that don't have a strong brand? Now, this is a difficult question for me because we work with somewhat mature companies, and it's like, how do you define like an unknown brand? I don't know. But I'm going to throw that question at you, and I'm curious like what you're seeing right now in 2026. This is June 18th as of the time of this recording. Who's succeeding in outbound right now? Forget AI for a moment. We'll get back to that. But who's just winning at outbound, period?
Very few. Myself included. Cold outbound right now, and it's been this way for a while, to be honest, is a marketing function. I've given up on it as a sales function. Actually, I did a presentation at Pavilion a while back, and it was called about a year ago. Actually, no, about 9 months ago. It was called Anything But Predictable. And it was how I think the predictable revenue model, I think, ruined sales in a lot of ways. The segmentation of roles, the assembly line approach, I think it turned us way more into a process than an art. And I'm a science guy when it comes to sales. Like, I think sales should be more of a science than an art because the science lays the foundation for the art form. But I think we have way over science sales, and we've turned it into this assembly line. And so we were able to get away with it in the good old days, right? I positioned 2010 to 2022 as the golden age of sales, especially in tech. Right. I mean, when money was free, grow at all costs, ROI didn't matter. Right. We could send out those massive email blasts, set up disco calls. Anybody with a pulse, ask dumbass Bant questions and offer a discount. Like, that's kind of what sales was for about 15 years, quite frankly. And did outbound work then? Sure. But I think it was just because, everybody was like, all right, yeah, what else? What else can we do? What else can we do? Now, personalization at scale and all this other stuff. If you're not familiar, if somebody's not familiar with you, the likelihood of somebody taking a chance on a new offering they've never heard of before or has no brand or anything like that from a cold outbound scenario is so low. I mean, you've heard the stats. By the time, I think it's like less than 5% of anybody's addressable market is actually in market to buy, and the other 95% are at some level of zero to, some interest. So that's why brand matters. That's why, that's why every single SDR organization that I've worked with in the past 2 to 3 years and even further back have rolled up under marketing, not sales. I mean, let's be the presentation that I did, that this whole predictable revenue model of SDRs becoming BDRs, becoming AEs, and this really great flow is just bullshit right now. The SDR
role, somebody who was never an SDR, like, I still have never understood it.
If you look at it fundamentally back then, it made sense because it was the proving ground and development ground for sales. If you look at it as a separate function in and of itself, it is the most unprofitable part of any business if you just look at it as its own entity. But if you layer on, okay, well, we can get relatively cheap labor out of school, we can teach them the ropes, whatever, and then they can grow into sales reps that then become AEs and stay with us, right? Theoretically, that makes sense in that regard. But the average SDR at this point, or at least 9 months ago, stayed at their company, not their job, stayed at their company for 16 months. So all that stuff that we put in training SDRs and hoping that they'll become AEs, the vast majority of them don't even stay at the company. Less than 50, even if they do, less than 50% of the SDRs that do stay at the company, less than 50% of them turn into AEs. The others turn into customer success or marketing or something else. The average quota attainment is 62% of SDRs. So they're not even achieving their quota at that point, right? It costs to get one deal. It costs $6,000 for just the SDR portion of the revenue. $6,000 for the first year, and that's just the SDR. Forget about the AE. So if your ACV isn't like 50 G's or more, like it doesn't make any sense. But we put SDRs on companies that are selling like a $3,000 ACV solution. Like, are you out of your mind? So no, it never really worked, but it was a blitz to the market. And I think now, if you understand that, then you can start to justify the SDR role if you look at it more as a marketing function. The fact that they're still getting paid commission still, I don't understand. Maybe a quarterly bonus based on revenue numbers that come in, but not arbitrary number of dials that you hit or erroneous meetings that you booked because you had to. But it's an impression point world. Right? Because that voicemail might then be, somebody could read it while they're sitting on the toilet, read the voicemail on their phone and then be like, oh, yeah, I remember that email. Let me go look at that email. Oh, let me go look at that LinkedIn profile. Let me go look at the website. Let me now jump into AI and do it. And so, there's still a place for it. It's just not anybody who thinks it's a sales role is is sadly mistaken in my opinion.
Quick pause. Everything we talk about on this show, diagnosing go-to-market ops, prioritizing projects for revenue impact, processes, metrics, insights, building a predictable go-to-market engine, we've built frameworks for all of it. They're free and ungated on our website, unionsquareconsulting.com/frameworks. The link will also be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out. All right, back to the episode.
Let me break this down a little bit. I'm going to share some things I'm seeing, like from firsthand experience, as well as what we see with our clients. And for context, we've got a lot of clients in B2B tech, and we've got some clients that are not in B2B tech. And so it is interesting to see how in some other industries, like they just don't subscribe to all these things that we, hold as gospel in the tech industry. It's like, I saw somebody post the other day, he's like, does anybody still hire like commission only reps? I'm like, yeah, the entire real estate industry, the entire automotive industry. And those are just the ones I know off the top of my head. So like the way that B2B, insurance, the way B2B tech works is not the way all go-to-market works. And so we definitely have some clients, especially outside of B2B tech, that, have outbound working. For me personally, I don't know if you'd consider this outbound, but for the last number of years, we've been reaching out to potential partners, to a lesser extent, like folks like yourself that are in consulting or marketing agencies, much more so like PE VC firms. And I totally believe in building brand. And so we're doing a podcast with you here. And that helps. And sometimes people are like, yeah, I saw your podcast, I saw your LinkedIn, I saw your newsletter, like happy to chat. But a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't know me from Adam. And there are particular firms that I've wanted to get in front of where I'm just like, I'm going to reach out to this guy 15 times via LinkedIn, via phone, via email, via care package in the mail. Like, I don't do enough of that, but it's an idea. And then if that doesn't work, go to the next person and the next person, and the next person, and thread the needle. And I can't really think of very many accounts where I've done that and we haven't broken in, even now, right now. And so for me, like when you compare that to like the SDR model of like, we're going to log into Outreach or SalesLoft, we've got our 15-step cadence. And I struggle using these tools as much as I'm a fan of them. Like there's always some idea that pops into my head and then it's 17 clicks for me to do the thing that I want to do instead of send the email that it tells me I have to send. Because like maybe I want to send them a LinkedIn DM. Maybe I want to comment on their LinkedIn post and wait 2 days and then come back. And I get stuck in this like this workflow that's so rigid that I can't get creative. And getting creative for me seems to still work. Now, granted, I'm not doing it at scale. I don't have like a 10-person SDR team I'm managing. And I have like the CEO title and some brand behind me. And you think that's the difference?
It's the give a shit factor, man. And you probably heard me say this before when Morgan came on board, right? When Morgan worked for me, Morgan and Groom, early days, he was an SDR manager, and he came on board and he created cadences, and he was the king of working with those tools, and he okay results, but then they leveled off, and he came to me one day and he said, John, I don't get it. Like I feel like I'm doing all the right things and I'm just not getting the results that I would expect to get based on all the effort that I'm putting in here. And I go, he's like, what do I need to do to change to be able to get better results? I said, Morgan, your results aren't going to change until one thing does. And he said, what? I said, until you start giving a shit, man. And he goes, what? I go, I know you give a shit about your job and working here and all that stuff, but until you start actually giving a shit about the person that you're reaching out to and think of them as a person, not a sequence you have to send, not a call you have to make, not a, until you start thinking of it like as somebody who wakes up in the morning, has to bring their kids to school, right? As it sits in traffic, gets yelled at by their boss, has 15 other initiatives that they're working on. Until you think of them that way, your results aren't going to change. And so what your approach is the right approach. It just doesn't scale, scale as it now it can if done the right way with the right tools to surface up signals and that type of stuff and really get pinpointed on your ICP. But so few companies are patient enough to do the foundation work that you talked about previously on your pyramid there of making sure that they're going after the right companies, that ABM is set up the right way so that they're making the impression points. And you look at companies and you realize, wow, this is somebody based on where they are and what they're doing. We know we can help. And if I know I can help because I've seen this before and I align with your values or whatever it is as an organization, well, now my messaging and my approach becomes a lot more authentic. And that these days, authenticity comes screaming through because all this AI stuff can make you sound absolutely fantastic, but it is so hollow. And I can feel it in every single one of them. I look at a lot of these AI generated emails and I'm like, yeah, that's good, but that wasn't you. And to me, if I know it's AI, I actually just wish there's one thing that I think would solve a lot of problems for a lot of people is if there was some way across the board, whether it was social, videos, emails, you name it, that had the little blue check mark on it where it was, well, red, yellow, green, right? So red being fully AI generated, yellow being AI augmented, and green being fully human. Because if I know it's AI, I'll actually read it. I'll be interested in it. But the moment a human tries to use AI to pretend like it's them and it's like it's human, and I sniff of AI, I discredit whatever it is, the video, like I don't care how valuable it is. If I feel like you use this to pretend like you were that smart or that good at whatever it was, like I don't give a shit. And I think a lot of people are the same way.
I'm curious about why, and I'll tell you why I care first. Because like, I think I was talking to somebody about this, and I think they were like accusing me of having a big ego here. And I thought about it, and I'm like, maybe that's part of it. But for me, if someone's reaching out to me and they're asking me for 30 minutes of my time, I'm looking at this as an investment in the most scarce resource I have. I can find more money. I can't find more time. And why should I invest 30 minutes with somebody? It's not because I have this huge ego and someone has stroked that ego. It's that if somebody is like actually taking the time to go to my website, go to my LinkedIn, understand who I am and what I do, and then decided to reach out to me, then it stands to reason like they're the expert at whatever it is that they do and who they help. So if they've invested time and they believe they can help me, then maybe they can help me. Now, I might still say no to that meeting. But if they're telling me like, hey, it's not worth my time to do any of that, I just used a template and or had the AI do it. And I haven't even received like very good AI emails either. And maybe that's just because I run a small business and I'm not like the worthwhile investment for the company to figure it out. But it's like, even these AI emails is like they scrape my LinkedIn post and regurgitate it. But like, there's not like a really strong connection between what I said in my LinkedIn post and what it is that they're pitching. It's just like this weird drop off of like, I know that you said like that, you know, you just had a kid, congratulations. And by the way, like, you know, are you SOC 2 compliant? I'm like, what? And it's just, for me, it's like, it seems like what you're signaling is that this isn't worth your time. So why should I genuinely believe, ego aside, that this is worth my time?
And I'm there with you. I do this, and I encourage every buyer to do this, by the way. A little while back, I took, I took 20 sales calls from 20 different reps, vendors in the tech space, right? Stuff that I was interested in, but that was secondary. The main reason I was doing it is because I want to see like, all right, how bad is it out there as far as sales reps' abilities to, you know, discovery calls and those type of things, right? And every single meeting I take with a sales rep, I do the exact same thing the first 5 minutes of every meeting. Say, hey, Eddie, thank you so much, man. I appreciate the time here. So before we get going, could you just do me a favor? Just tell me what you know about me and the company so far so we can kind of skip whatever we need to skip here. You know, when I tell you 14 out of 20 couldn't even tell me I did sales training. And by the way, that's all you had to do. I see you do some sales training consulting, John. I see you work with some pretty cool logos. You maybe got some on-site and on-demand stuff and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's it. As long as you just said that, we continued the conversation. 14 out of 20 couldn't even say that. Well, you know, and the telltale sign is always, well, you know, I was on your website, but I'd really like to hear from you it's like, God. So guess what? I hung up on 14 out of 20 people within 5 minutes of the conversation. And that's not an ego thing. That's a fuck you thing. To your point, my time is valuable. So is yours. I'm not saying my time is more valuable than yours, but if you want my time, you better value it because you asked for it. You know what I mean? If I ask for your time, I damn well better do it. You know what I mean? Like that's a difference. Like, and so I don't think it's being an ego for you to expect somebody to have, you know, put some effort into. Now, don't get me wrong. There's certain things that just hit, you know what I mean? No matter what, like when you get that email, it's like, shit, man, I need that. And that's why I think in the future, I know, you know, a lot of this conversation is about like the future of outbound and those type of things. People say like email is dead. I think maybe here in the short term, I think email is going to come back to being one of the most valuable. I think our inbox is going to be incredibly valuable moving forward. You know why? Because think about Instagram for a minute, right? Instagram has got me on point. Like that algorithm, I've trained that out. Well, that algorithm has trained me. So now like literally everything on Instagram is like, yep, want that. Didn't even know that was a thing. That seems really cool. You know what I mean? So it's so tailored to what I like. Stuff that I didn't even know I needed. I'm like, that's great. you can't tell me that in a year or two that our AI isn't going to know us well enough, and out there in the ecosystem is going to know our digital footprint well enough to start sending super hyper personalized, timely, relevant emails. And our AI version of us is going to be filtering out all the bullshit and letting the stuff get in, not just spam, but like things that, John, you should probably look at this. Eddie just wrote a really cool email about some research that he did on you and gave this offering, and this is one you should pay attention. And so I think our inboxes are going to be clean as shit here in the next couple of years with super relevant stuff. And at the end of the day, in that scenario, do I care if it's a human or not? No, I don't.
I wouldn't care either. And I mean, for me, like the bar is so low. If somebody reached out and they just said, hey, Eddie, I know you run a small professional services business. This is a problem that you're probably facing. And if I was facing that problem, I'd be like, you know what? Like maybe you could help me. But like, I think the problem is so many of the pitches I get are like, hey, Eddie, I know you do XYZ. Like, I want to tell you about how we helped Oracle. And I'm like, cool. Okay. And I got a call today, and I thought this was really interesting. This SDR cold calls me, and I see the number pop up, and I'm like, fuck it, let me pick it up. And he's like, what does he say? I can't remember how he opened it, but he was pitching an AI like SDR solution, some aspect of it I didn't understand. And his pitch was like, it does all this account research, and so you can understand the account, everything like that. And he starts opening up, and he's like, tell me about like what your SDRs are doing. And I'm just like, oh man, like, could you have made this any easier for me to be like a dick without actually having to be a dick? And I just was like, so help me understand this. So your tool will do all this account research, and you can understand all these things about the account before you pick up the phone. He's like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, so you would be able to know if a company has like a team of SDRs? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Like we use Zoom Info. And he just goes into his pitch, right? And I'm just like, he's like, so how are your SDRs doing things? And I'm like, I don't have any SDRs. And I'm like, so you don't use your tool to do that thing? He's like, no. It's really, we don't use our tool for that. And I was like, okay. And then, but then like and I think I'm kind of like mixing up the order of conversation here. And then I told him that we didn't have any SDRs, and he just hung up on me. And I wasn't even mean about it. I was just like, you're wasting your own time because you haven't done the segmentation. And if I could kind of bring this conversation full circle back, because I know we're already 2/3 the way through the podcast, I want to talk about the foundation here, and you already touched on it. And for me, like, if you haven't carefully defined your ICP and your buyer personas and build out segmentation, and you have this like very carefully curated list, which is not hard to do, such that when you're calling and pitching a solution for SDRs, maybe call people that have SDRs, crazy idea. Is that not like the basic foundation of Outbound, whether you're using AI or not?
Yeah, 100%. And it's, again, it goes to the give a shit factor. It goes to business acumen. The problem is you and I mean, you're younger than I am, right? I just hit 50. When I grew up like in sales, like I had to do all the grunt work, like this shit. You know what I mean? Like literally, when I say knock on doors, I mean knock on doors. Like get thrown out of office buildings. I had to go to take like a Polaroid of a directory and then go back and do some homework. You know what I mean? And then send a mailer and then then handwritten notes and all. So I was able to kind of like build those muscles, if you will, from the foundational part. Like I understood business, I understood body language, I understood what it was like to give a dumb pitch and watch somebody literally physically see them like shut up or throw me out of the office, not just in this world, right? And so now for somebody like me, it is like AI is a superpower because I have this like context and I can question it. I go, nope. So I can use it for the right reasons. I can use it to do the right type of research, but I won't use it to automate anything. Now, unfortunately, relatively newer generation who grew up after COVID in this world, everything's been transactional. So a lot of the grind and the things that created the foundation and the fundamentals just aren't there anymore. And we've gone from this search engine to an answer engine. And that's a dangerous thing, right? Because we can all argue that Google and the search engine would kind of give us whatever it felt like giving us, right? But at least it was a perception of choice, right? We had to maybe read an article, heaven forbid, and kind of click on something every once in a while. Now AI just gives you the answer. And for those of us that are curious, it's a fantastic thing. For those of us that aren't, unfortunately, the vast majority of people who are just going back to it, lazy cavemen, blah, they're just going to copy, paste, send. They're just going to tell, hey, here's a good lead for you. Call them. Here's your pitch. Go. And they're not making the connection that why?
For me, this is this is not just a generational thing. This is a culture thing within the industry. So like for background, I sold vacuum cleaners door to door and used cars before I graduated college. And I knocked on doors, and I'm younger than you, but not by much. I turned 43 in a couple months. And I was selling, I think my first sales job, I was like maybe 16 for like an actual job. I sold stuff door to door that I like before that, but actual job, I was like selling vacuum cleaners door to door. But I spent the bulk of the first 10 years of my career in finance. Like I was calling major private equity funds saying like, hey, I know you're raising $1 billion fund. I'd like you to hire my company to help you raise your fund. It was unfathomable for me that I would like not understand who they are and what they do trying to make a pitch like that, right? Even though I was only like 27. And so then I did that for a few years, that particular job. And then I went to Salesforce. And like, I think Salesforce did a lot of things right. You know, we had your training. There's some good stuff there. But it was still so much more transactional than what I was used to. And then I've just seen like the whole predictable revenue model just carry forward. And I remembered like part of the reason I went to Salesforce is I was drinking the Kool-Aid of the whole thing. And I was trying to tell like my colleagues on Wall Street, like, hey, like these are some of the things that we could do. And they were just like, that's insane. Like there's no way that like we're going to have like an SDR team. They were resistant to content marketing. And you can see that they've come around on that kind of stuff. But I kind of jumped into the industry and I saw like the opposite end of the spectrum, and it's just continued forward. And it just feels like everybody wants this easy button. And to me, like I've hired 2 sales reps recently that unfortunately didn't work out. And with both of them, I was like, I want you to tailor each of your messages. We have outreach, you can use it, but I want every single message tailored. And they were booking meetings, and then they got busy and they're like, let me just use a template. And all of a sudden the meetings dried up. And I'm like, and then both of those folks left and went elsewhere. And these are folks from the tech industry. And it seemed to me like one of them was like, yeah, I'm just going to go back to my old company because they just feed me leads. I don't have to do this. And I'm now at the point where I'm like, I'm going to hire somebody that's not from the tech industry, that's not been brought up this way, that is willing to like roll up their sleeves and do the hard work and do the research and manually write the email. And by all means, to the extent we can use AI to do that, let's do that 100%. But we can't skip the important steps to make the person on the other end feel like we care about them.
No. I mean, I partner up with a group called Service to Software, and it's taking military veterans, and they take my training, and they're transitioning military veterans into tech sales. I'd rather have one of them all day long. Like, talk about work ethic, talk about, following a process and, doing what they need to do like all day long. But yeah, we have, it's the problem is, and we can make the analogy here to the trophy generation, right? Like everybody's looking for the easy button, the trophy generation, and everybody's always, every kid wants a trophy. Well, yeah. And who gave them the trophies?
Well, and that's the thing, like, I don't blame this guy. And like, I kind of feel bad saying this on a podcast to like knock somebody that worked for me, because he worked hard. He's a really good guy. And why would I blame him for going back to a job where he just gets fed leads? And for me, it's a little bit difficult to compete against like a VC backed company that's like, hey, look, we're going to spend $5 to generate $1 of revenue. And I'm like, yeah, that model doesn't work for me. So if I'm trying to compete against you for the next sales rep, I'm just going to lose that battle. By all means, give that guy $5 to generate $1 of revenue. I'll pass.
Yep, 100%. Well, and again, I think this is what the VC world did I mean, I blame a lot the SaaS companies and the tech companies. Sure, I blame the VCs because this grow at all costs, go, profitability, who cares, with top line revenue growth, go. I think created a lot of bad habits and a lot of terrible companies, and a lot of, the trickle down effect of, well, that's the way it was supposed to be. That's why you see people, popping from role to role, SDR role to SDR role to SDR role, as opposed to like staying for a little while and then moving up to an AE, because they hit the wall as an SDR and they go look for the easier version and the easier version and the easier version. And or try to skip through SDR as quickly as possible to get to the AE, because that's where the money's made, right? Nobody has any patience anymore. And I get it, because things are moving faster than I've ever seen them before. So why, we also have to understand, this is one thing that struck me a while back. And it was I think it was the millennials, and it was probably about 10, 15 years ago, where I said, look, I did a post of like, stop doing what you're supposed to do. And the whole idea was like, you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. Like with me, right? I was married, I was engaged for 7 years when I was a kid, or I was with a girl for 7 years, right? So what was I supposed to, I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to buy a house. I'm supposed to have a kid. I'm supposed to do these things, right? I knew that our relationship wasn't great, but what do you do after 7 years? You're supposed to do that, right? Well, you're supposed to get a job. You're supposed to get promoted. You're supposed to move into this role. And I'm like, stop doing that. Like, stop doing what you're supposed to do. And because those two things got broken for me, like I got fired from it, and she dumped me, and that was the best things that could ever happen to me. But what was interesting was the rep said, well, John, that's all well and good for you because you had a structure to deviate from. And there's comfort in structure, right? Like when I was growing up, yeah, like you went to college, and then after you went to college, you got a job. And then you stayed at that job for a while, and then you got promoted. So you could deviate if you wanted to, but there was comfort in knowing that there was a structure here. There's no structure anymore. Anything is all over the place. And so the kid was basically like I don't know what I'm supposed to do at this point. So I think that's the problem, is there's this angst going on right now of, you said it when we started, like you feel like you're behind all the time. Like AI is moving so fast, no matter how much you quote unquote stay up to date on it, you still tomorrow will feel behind. And so there's this immediacy to, I need to get this, I need to do that. And I don't think anything but age and experience gives you perspective on slowing the fuck down. And how, you're going to have a 50-year career in front of you. So, spend the 16 months as an SDR, because that's, when you make a move to an AE, you have a 90+% success rate versus leaving after, getting promoted after 6 months as an SDR, and you have a 90% failure rate. You know what I mean? Like there's I got to get to this thing, and I need this quick hit, endorphin rush on my TikTok because I got to get that video. So everything's transactional right now. And I don't think it's necessarily anybody's fault other than the evolution of where we've gotten from a tech, from a social, and everything else. So it's rare to find those people that have that perspective. And those are the ones that I want to hire. And those are the ones, that's why hiring of grit and work ethic and those type of things is brutal, but it's what you got to look for.
Yeah. And I do think like that's something where you just have to experience it. And I don't want to like knock the younger generation, because there are people that have experienced things that you and I will never go through by the time they're 16, Oh
my God.
And, and like, I think like, economics make a big difference. Like I hate when people paint like an entire generation with a broad brush, and it's like, oh, these kids have been given everything. And I'm like, okay, how about the first generation immigrant that like had to work for everything in their life, and they're only like 20 years old, but like they fought and clawed their way to like first kid to go to college and their family, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, let's not take credit away from that person. But I will say, like, your story gives me this visual. I remember vividly, like exactly where I was running on this treadmill, literally, in like 2010, and I was so angry because I was the first AE in this startup. I had left finance because this was the financial crisis. It wasn't working out for me. I went to work at this like tech startup. I ended up going back to finance because I had zero interest in like being like a tech sales rep at that time. And I just felt like I was the biggest failure in life because like my career path wasn't working out. I was working on plan B. I was in this tech company, not selling anything. I was the only AE, like no idea what I was doing, making cold calls, trying to like make stuff happen, and just failing miserably. And even though I was like earning a good base salary and like more money than all of my friends, I just was like running on this treadmill, like literally going through the motions in my head, asking myself why I was such a miserable failure. I ended up leaving that job, going to New York, getting a couple pretty good jobs on Wall Street. But that planted the seed in me where I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, ended up going to work for Salesforce, and then doing this thing for the last 10 years. And it's like that job literally like built the life that I have today. And I couldn't even recognize it at the time because I was so pissed that I wasn't crushing quota and like putting another bullet point on my resume during one of the most difficult like years in like the economy in the last 100 years. But I just didn't have that perspective at that time.
I don't think you can. I that's why people ask, like, if you could go back, what would be some advice? One piece of advice would just be pay attention. You know what I mean? Like, pay attention to how the company's making decisions, how your boss rolled out that new comp plan, how you, and just realize like all these little building blocks are eventually going to put you in a position, right? That's why like in your 20s, you should fail a lot because your responsibilities are limited. You know what I mean? 30s, probably pick a lane. 40s, if you haven't really kind of picked your lane by then, you're kind of fucked. But you can still reinvent yourself then. And so I do think that as much as I think you're probably the same, one of the big reasons I do what I do is because I've made so many mistakes along the way. And I've failed hundreds, if not thousands of times. And my hope in what I train and what I do is to share some of those experiences so the person behind me doesn't have to make as many, not make none, but don't have to make as many as I did. So that they can get there maybe a little bit faster, right? And so, because age is the biggest teacher that any of us will have. Experience is the biggest teacher any of us will have. And you can think about how fucking young, dumb, and idiot you were when you were, a teenager in your 20s. I mean, I was invincible at that age. I thought I knew, like, I mean, ego. I don't know. I wasn't like that wicked cocky kid, but man, I was up there. And if some old man came to tell me, like, dude, slow down, I'd be like, dude, fuck you. I'm on a rocket ship right now. I'm going to conquer the world. Right. And until you get your teeth kicked in a couple of times, until you realize, like, oh, there's a couple of, I'm sure you said there's a couple of people on, I don't want to call out any names, but some like influencers who are rage baiting, the cohort kill, all this crap. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, and anytime they come after me, like, being like, yeah, you're a loser, you're old. I'm like, you're adorable. I'm like, you're adorable. The fact that you're gonna do this for another 6, maybe 12 months is cute. It's, come to me in 20 years and still do this. Like, do you know how many people I was having this? Because I'll tell you right now, 2 nights ago, I've been in not a great place for the past couple of weeks because I'm like, Q1 was great for me. Q2 disappeared. Q3 disappeared. I was like, holy shit, what's going on, right? And mid-market tech SaaS is what I built my entire, which is the epicenter of the fuck off when it comes to AI and the disruption, right? So I'm like, oh my, and I'm like doing everything and it's not working, but grinding and everything. And I went and met with my mentor, who is the best salesperson I've ever met in my entire life. He's the best trainer I've met in my entire life. And he sells to the enterprise. So I'm figuring he's going to kill it, right? He's doing fine because enterprise is better than mid-market. And I sat down and he's the same thing. He's pipeline's empty. Nobody's calling him any, like that type of thing. And he was like, but John, he goes, when was the last time you had a boss? And I was like, 2011. He goes, so for 15 years, you've worked for yourself. He's like, you got a house, right? He's like, you got a house in Costa Rica, don't you? You're putting your daughter through school. You got a good wife. You got a car. It's like, do you know how many people do that? Can stay on their own for 15 years? He's like, we've had a real good run, man. He's like, did you think it was going to last forever? And even at this age, I'm like, well, I kind of was hoping it was going to last a little, you know what I mean? But he's looking at it, he's like, no, man. He's like, you just got to be going back to what we said, gratitude earlier. You know what I mean? Like, so I think there's an appreciation for longevity. And anybody who thinks, that flash in the pants, like, just, okay, cool. Talk to me in 10 years, talk to me in 20 years. And most people don't make that, man. And most people have to go back to doing what they were doing or, eat some humble pie before they realize that, their shit stinks too.
Well, you remind me of just dumb things we say and do in our 20s. And I'll go back to the same job that I was talking to you about earlier. And I remember talking to my colleague, Ben, who at the time was just like part of our customer success team. And we were selling basically a version of Salesforce to private equity. So after a year, I leave, I go to New York, and I'm like, going to get a job in private equity. And I remember I was standing on a train platform talking to him on the phone, and just the dumbest, like 20-something comment ever. And I'm like, yeah, Ben, I'm going to go try to like work in private equity and make some real money. Even as I said it, I was like, what a dick thing to say, right? Well, anyway, fast forward, this like shitty little like software company that I worked at, it never made it big. But they sold the company, and Ben became the CFO prior to selling the company. And last time I reached out to Ben, he's only a couple years older than me. I'm like, hey, Ben, like, it's been a while. I want to catch up. What are you up to? And he's like, I'm retired. And I'm like, oh yeah, see who made the real money. Like, now I don't think he's driving a Ferrari, but like Ben doesn't have to work anymore. And I think he's in his 40s. It's like, hindsight is 2020.
You know how many tech bros that I know who look down on blue collar? All my friends are blue collar. Like, I'm actually one of the only, like, of my core grew up in, Bedford High School in Massachusetts here. Most of my friends are contractors and construction guys and whatever it is. And do you know how, like, you see this from like the white collar to that? Do you know how many of those kids are actually millionaires? Like the ones who are the landscaper who stayed with it and did the unsexy thing, the guy who, went into laundry mats or whatever it was. And like these people live incredible lives. They make tons of money and you would never even know it. And I go back to Gary Vaynerchuk, man. Like, I don't follow him nearly as much as I used to, but he said this, he goes, look, happiness is the goal, period. And happiness is relative and everybody's got their own definition of it. But I know a bunch of millionaires who are miserable pricks. I know people who make 50 grand a year and are happy as pigs in shit. They go to their 9 to 5, they come home, they coach their kids' soccer game, they have their weekend, beers with their friends, and they live a very simple, happy life. And to me, those people win. The millionaire, billionaire, I just look at all these like trillionaires and be like, how much money do you fucking need, man? You know what I mean? Like, and don't get me wrong, it's everybody's got their own definition. But I think if you're chasing something that is somebody else's definition of happiness, you're chasing the wrong thing. That's why whenever I talk to somebody who's trying to make some life decisions, I ask them very directly. I'm like, have you gone through the core values exercise yet? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, have you gone through? I'm like, they're like, oh, I know my values. I go, no. Have you gone through the core values exercise yet? Where you literally sit down and you talk through, and there's a process that you can go through. And I actually created a little AI prompt pack to guide people through it. And it's one of those things where once you do that and you kind of recenter on what your core values are, you start to look at things a lot differently. You start to realize what's actually important to you. And then you start to make a lot better decisions about your career and your life and everything else.
Couldn't agree more. Well, we're almost at time. This has been a fun conversation, way off track, but fun. I'm curious to see how the metrics are going to come out for this, like if people really stuck with it or if they were just looking for brass tactics. But this is awesome. John, where can people find out more if they want to know your philosophies on life and finding meaning, or if they just want some brass tactics for like improving their outbound engine or sales in general? Where can they find you?
I appreciate it. Yeah, the website's, that's where you get everything, right? So jbarrows.com, that's where my YouTube channel is, and you can go in the resources and Instagram and all the other fun stuff, LinkedIn, obviously. And I put a ton of super tactical stuff out there for sales across the board. But also I have the podcast, Make It Happen Mondays, where I've evolved from those tactics to conversations about, mental health and all those type of things, because, I'm on a journey just like everybody else. And just like I tell people, I'm not really a sales trainer. I'm a sales rep who happens to train. I'm a business professional that's out there scraping and clog just like everybody else is. And what I'm trying to do is stay a little bit ahead, maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead, so that I can maybe guide whoever is paying attention. And that's why these type of things are great, man, because you never know who's listening. So like metrics to me on like listening, viewership, they don't matter nearly as much as the email, the DM that I get from somebody that says, hey man, you trained me 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I know you don't remember me, but that one class changed my perspective. Or man, I listened to you on your podcast the other day and the way you were talking about this really changed my perspective. And now I'm doing this. That to me is worth 1 million downloads.
Well, hey man, I went through your training at Salesforce and I used it to build my company. So thanks, John.
There you go. Right. I'll tell you, man, like that when you look at like the likes and the comments on LinkedIn, and the easiest way to beat the algorithm is be you, be genuine, try to help, because you might not get 1 million comments, but man, when you get that fucking DM from that kid who said, holy shit, man, thank you so much for saying what was on my mind or whatever, it's like I said, it's worth 1 million fucking likes or comments that you could get on any post. So I appreciate that.
Thanks for coming onto the show, John.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com, and the info will be in our show notes.